Hello, it's great to be here again for our weekly stream. Uh, I'm Amor. I make playing games so that you can play games. Although today we're reading, as I really like classics, and that is what we're doing. Before we get on with it, there are some public service announcements. I plan to do an art stream again tomorrow for the first time in like a while. I've been wanting to join VGen for a bit, or at least have an, ability to do so maybe. And they have their monthly contest where you can get a spot on the website, I suppose. It's a commissioning platform for those of you that are not aware. That's where artists can find lots of commissions and where you can find artists to commission. Overall, pretty good. It's somewhat exclusive, I suppose, in the way that it is invite only. So you can either get an invite from a friend or you can get an invite by competing, I think. And the top 10% get the invite. So it's pretty good. That being said, this month's theme is horse. I don't know if you can tell by my tone, but I don't really draw horses, first of all. It's I have an idea of what to do now because I was thinking about it just like before, maybe 5 minutes before. Um, then I started stream. Like, what is it that I do with a horse? I could. I'm inspired by there was this one meme of the evil and intimidating lesbian horse. I think I could make like a very pretty, drawing of that. Maybe like a meadow and then two silhouettes of horses, maybe or something. Or maybe I'll make it more evil and intimidating. Who knows? Tune in tomorrow for that. But until then, today's reading is The Hound of Baskervilles by Sir Conan Doyle. I have actually picked this book up once in the library by chance and then put it back down very quickly. I do not remember entirely why. I think partially it is because I'm not that big fan of a detective. A lot of my family members are, but I personally didn't really get hooked on them very much. That being said, I'm committed to reading as many classics as I can and in as many genres as I can, first of all. Second of all, it could also have been because the book is written in first person, which is, I don't know, for some reason it just feels weird to me when I read first person sometimes, except for like the odd part about this, right? That when I'm reading translated novels, for example, they're very often written first person. There's plenty of ones that I know translated from Chinese that I read that are also in first person. I just don't even notice it. So I'm not entirely sure. This reading will be in multiple parts though, because the book is rumored to be 120 pages. I know it says 75 at the top here. Um, I don't know if I can trust that, but on either way, we'll probably not get through the entire thing today. Other than that, thank you for being patient. I hope everything's great over at where you are, and let's start on the book. Quick little overview once I reach it over here. This book is in the public domain. It is old. It's also very famous, and we'll get through that. It is a Sherlock Holmes novel. I believe those are written from the perspective of Watson as he watches Sherlock, which is kind of neat. That is my belief at the moment, anyway. As we go through it, we'll see if there's any interesting bits that we can analyze. But until then, we'll have a good old read. There's, yep. It does seem like it will be only 75 pages, but these pages are double-sided in a way you'll see in a second. See, double-sided. I really do appreciate like neat letters though, and it does. My current zoom level makes it very easy to tell which side of the page I'm on, which is also quite neat. I have with me a cup of chamomile tea. In Ukraine, that would be Moscow chai, and it's got honey in it, so hopefully my voice will be good for the duration. I might take a break at some point again to refill the cup though. Hopefully there's not too much interference, and we can begin. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the mornings, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearthrug and picked up the stick with our visitor. I might be better off reading from the bottom, I think, than it is from my top monitor. Indeed. We'll see. For some reason, my eyes are jumping a bit. Here, maybe it's the double layers. Um, mm. It was fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous-headed, of the sort which is known as Penang lawyer. Just under the head was a broad silver band nearly an inch across. To James Mortimer, RCS, from his friend of the CCH, was engraved upon it, with the date 1884. It was just such a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. Well, Watson, what do you make of it? Holmes was sitting with his back to me, and I had given him no sign of my occupation. How did you know what I was doing? I believe your eyes in the back of your head. I believe you have eyes in the back of your head. I have, at least, a well-polished, silver-plated coffee pot in front of me, said he. But tell me, Watson, what do you make of our visitor's stick? Since we have been so unfortunate as to miss him, and have no notion of his errand, and this accidental souvenir became of importance. Let me hear you reconstruct the man by examination of it. I think, said I, following as far as I could tell the methods of my companion, that Dr. Mortimer is a successful elderly medical man, well esteemed since those who know him gave him this mark of their appreciation. Good, said Holmes. Excellent. I think also that the probability is in favor of his being a country practitioner who does a great deal of visiting on foot. Why so? Because this stick, though originally a very handsome one, has been so knocked about that I can hardly imagine a town practitioner carrying it. The thick iron rule is worn down, so it is evident that he has done a great amount of walking with it. Perfectly sound, said Holmes. And then again there is the Friends of the CCH. I should guess that to be something Hunt, the local Hunt whose members he has possibly given some surgical assistance, and which has made him a small presentation in return. I quite enjoy the term presentation in this one. I've never heard it used for presents before, like literal presents. It's really neat to see it in older English literature because it makes a lot of sense of where the word came from, reading it in this context. That's quite neat. Back up we go. The scrolling is rather slow here. Really, Watson, you excel yourself, said Holmes, pushing back his chair and lighting a cigarette. I am bound to say that in all these accounts which you have been so good as to give of my own small achievements, you have habitually underrated your own abilities. It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. Some people without possessing genius have a remarkable power of stimulating it. I confess, my dear fellow, that I am very much in your debt. He had never said as much before, and I must admit that his words gave me keen pleasure, for I had often been piqued by his indifference to my admiration, and to the attempts which I had made to give the publicity to his methods. I was proud, too, to think that I had so far mastered his system as to apply it in a way which earned his approval. He now took the stick from my hands and examined it for a few minutes with his naked eyes. Then, with an expression of interest, he laid down his cigarette, and, carrying the cane to the window, he looked over it with a convex lens. Interesting, though elementary, said he, as he returned to his favorite corner of the settle. There are certainly one or two indications upon the stick. It gives us the basis for several deductions. Has anything escaped me? I asked with some self-importance. I trust that there is nothing of consequence which I have overlooked. I am afraid, my dear Watson, that most of your conclusions were erroneous. When I said that you stimulated me, I meant to be frank, that it's nothing you're in. My apologies. I meant that in noticing your fallacies, I was occasionally guided towards the truth. Not that you're entirely wrong in this instance. The man is certainly a country practitioner, and he walks a good deal. Then I was right, to that extent. But that's all. No, no, my dear Watson, not all. By no means all. I would suggest, for example, that a presentation to a doctor is more likely to come from a hospital than from a hunt, and that when the initials CC are placed before the hospital, the words Charing Cross naturally suggest themselves. You may be right. The probability lies in that direction, and if we take this as a working hypothesis, we have a fresh basis from which to start our construction of this unknown visitor. Well, then, supposing that CCH does stand for Charing Cross Hospital, what further inferences may we draw? I wonder if I'm mispronouncing Charing, because British names are really weird. I'm trying to pronounce the ch sound. At the moment, I do contain some metal things on my teeth, and therefore find that I whistle a lot more than I pronounce clearly. Um, but with that in mind, I know that there's things like Worcester sauce and Birmingham and other similar names that come from Britain that are just a bit whack to pronounce. So I'm wondering if this is in fact like a Charing cross instead of a Charing, or even a Charing. I don't think it's Charing. That's unlikely. I will probably keep pronouncing it as Charing, but I would like to make this note for the dear reader, and likewise my viewers. Do none suggest themselves? You know my methods, apply them. I can only think of the obvious conclusion that the man has practiced in town before he going to the country. I think we might venture a little further than this. Look at this in this light. Look at it in this light. On what occasion would it be most probable that such a presentation would be made? When would his friends unite to give him a pledge of their goodwill? Obviously, at the moment when Dr. Mortimer withdrew from the service of the hospital in order to start in practice for himself. Ooh, that's an interesting way of wording that again. They don't usually say in practice nowadays. They usually say to start his own practice or to start a practice. But in is quite neat. We know there has been presentation. We believe there has been a change from town to hospital to a country practice. Is it, then, stretching our inference too far to say that the presentation was on the occasion of the change? It certainly seems possible. Now, you will observe that he could not have been on the staff of the hospital, since only a man well established in a London practice could hold such position, and such a one would not drift into the country. What was he then? If he was in the hospital and yet not on the staff, he could only have been a house surgeon or a house physician, little more than a senior student. And he left 5 years ago. The date is on the stick. So your grave, middle-aged family practitioner vanishes into thin air, my dear Watson, and there emerges a young fellow under 30, amiable, unambitious, absent-minded, and the possessor of a favorite dog, which I should describe roughly as being larger than a terrier and smaller than a mastiff. I laughed incredulously as Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his saddle and blew little wavering rings of smoke up into to the ceiling. As to the later part, I have no means of checking you, said I, but at least it is not difficult to find out a few particulars about the man's age and professional career. From my small medical shelf, I took down a medical dictionary and turned up the name. There were several Mortimers, but only one who could be our visitor. I read his record aloud. Mortimer James MRCS 1882, Grimpen, Dartmoor, Devon. House surgeon from 1882 to 1884 at Charing Cross Hospital. Winner of Jackson Prize for Comparative Pathology with easy essay entitled Is Disease a Revision? Corresponding member of the Swedish Pathological Society, author of Some Freaks of Atavism, Lancet 1882. Do We Progress? Journal of Psychology, March 1883. Medical officer of the parish of Gimpson, my apologies, of the parishes of Gimpson, Sarsley, and Highbrow. No mention of local hunt, Watson, said Holmes with a mischievous smile. But a country doctor, as you very astutely observed. I think that I am fairly justified in my inferences. As to the adjectives, I said, if I remember right, amiable, unambitious, and absent-minded. It is my experience that it is only an enviable man in this world who receives testimonials, only an unambitious one who abandons a London career for the country, and only an absent-minded one who leaves his stick and not his visiting card after waiting an hour in your room. And the dog? Has been in the habit of carrying the stick behind his master. Being a heavy stick, the dog held it tightly by the middle, and the marks of his teeth are very plainly visible. The dog's jaw, as shown in the spaces between these marks, is too broad, in my opinion, for a terrier, and not broad enough for a mastiff. I may have been, yes, by Jove, it is a curly-haired spaniel. He had risen and paced the room as he spoke. Now he halted in the recess of the window. There was such a ring of conviction in his voice that I glanced up in surprise. My dear fellow, how could you possibly be sure of that? For the very simple reason that I see the dog himself on our very doorstep, and there is the ring of its owner. Don't move, I beg you, Watson. He's a professional brother of yours, and your presence may be of assistance to me. I wonder what professional brother of yours means. Because maybe it's because like a dog's best friend. Perhaps that is my theory with this. I apologize, I'm not a big scholar myself. I enjoy reading literature, but I'm not yet of a scholarly disposition towards it. Thus, I'm figuring out some things as we're going through. I do find that it may be interesting to you, dear viewer, as well. So it could be that brother of yours refers to man's best friend, and he's a professional at it, perhaps. Now is a dramatic moment of fate, Watson, when you hear a step upon the stair, which is walking into your life, and you know not whether for good or ill. What does Dr. James Mortimer, the man of science, ask of Sherlock Holmes, the specialist in crime? Come in! The appearance of our visitor was a surprise to me, since I had expected a typical country practitioner. He was a very tall, thin man, with a long nose like a beak, which jutted out between two keen grey eyes set closely together and sparkling brightly from behind a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He was clad in a professional, but rather slovenly fashion, for his frock coat was dingy and his trousers frayed. Though young, his long back was already bowed, and he walked with a forward thrust of his head, and a general air of peering benevolence. As he entered, his eyes fell upon the stick in Holmes's hand, and he ran towards it with an exclamation of joy. "I'm so very glad," said he. "I was not sure whether I had left it here or in the shipping office. I would not lose the stick for the world." "A presentation, I see," said Holmes. "Yes, sir." "From a Charing Cross Hospital?" "Charming." "From one or two friends there on the occasion of my marriage." "Dear, dear, that's bad," said Holmes, shaking his head. Dr. Mortimer blinked through his glasses in mild astonishment. Why is it bad? Only that you have disarranged our little deductions. You're married, you say? Yes, sir, I'm married, and so left the hospital, and with it all hopes of consulting practice. It was necessary to make a home of my own. Come, come, we're not so far wrong after all, said Holmes. And now, Dr. James Mortimer, Mr. Sir, Mr. Humble Mr. MRCS, and a man of precise mind, evidently. A dabbler in science, Mr. Holmes, a picker-upper of shells and shores on the shores of the great unknown ocean. I presume that it is Mr. Sherlock Holmes whom I am addressing, and not. No, this is my dear friend Watson. Glad to meet you, sir. I have heard your name mentioned in connection with that of your friend. You interest me very much, Mr. Holmes. I had hardly expected so dull. Okay, let me decipher how to read this. Dolichocephalic. Dolichocephalic. I had hardly expected so. Mm, I had hardly expected so dolichocephalic a skull or such well-marked supraorbital development. Oh, I've lost the page. Come back. Would you have any objection to my running my finger along your parietal fissure? Our cast of your skull, sir, until the original is available, would be an ornament to any anthropological museum. It is not my intention to be fulsome, but I confess that I covet your skull. Sherlock Holmes waved a strange visitor into a chair. Uh, you are an enthusiast in your line of thought, I perceive, sir, as I am in mine, said he. I need to get more used to the precise burn of old English this uses. I do absolutely love it though. The backwards way of saying things, as opposed to like instead of saying he said, saying said he, is very common within altered literature, but it does depend on the time period exactly what it is that they do and how. But it does remind me a little bit of some of the other languages I know, because I speak like four of them, or at least know nonetheless. And in many of them, they turn a completely inverse uh, sentence structure to English. Well, everyone knows like Japanese doing this thing, but Ukrainian, for example, does a person first form of language, which doesn't necessarily mean it is constantly reversed, but it does mean that where English is subject first, it does often reverse from that. Sherlock Holmes waved our strange visitor into a chair. You are an enthusiast in your line of thought, I perceive, sir, as I am in mine, said he. I observe from your forefinger that you make your own cigarettes. Have no hesitation in lighting one. The man drew out a paper and tobacco, and twirled the one up and the other with surprising dexterity. He had long, quivering fingers, as agile and restless as the antennae of an insect. Holmes was silent, but his little darting glances showed me the interest which he took in our curious companion. I presume, sir, he said he at last, that it was not merely for the purpose of examining my skull that you have done me the honor to call here last night and again today. Ooh, they use a hyphen for today. Sorry, this is very exciting to me. Because normally in modern English they just say today, but it's a hyphen here. I do love that, honestly. It makes a lot of sense. With modern English, it's very hard to tell sometimes what any of the words mean within context, unlike compound languages such as Ukrainian and Russian, for example, where all words come from, a root word, so you can kind of understand where the thought process was from and mix them and match them. Or even how in, not always, Japanese is rather confusing, but a lot of the time with at least kanji, you can tell where the thought process was and therefore the general vibe of the word from its, root. Um, and components. In English, most of the time, that's not very common. It's not a very compound language. It'll have an individual word for most things. But here you can kind of see how it might have been a compound language once upon a time. And I find that quite fascinating. No, sir, no. As though I am happy to have had the opportunity of doing that as well. I came to you, Mr. Holmes, because I recognized that I am myself an unpractical man, and because I am suddenly confronted with a most serious and extraordinary problem, recognizing, as I do, that you are the second highest expert in Europe. Indeed, sir. May I inquire who has the honor to be the first? Asked Holmes with some asperity. To the man of precisely scientific mind, the work of Monsieur Bertillon must always appeal strongly. Then, had you not better consult him? I said, sir, to the precisely scientific mind. But as a practical man of affairs, it is acknowledged that you stand alone. I trust, sir, that I have not inadvertently just a little, said Holmes. I think, Dr. Mortimer, you would do wisely if, without more ado, you would kindly tell me plainly what the exact nature of the problem is in which you demand my assistance. I have in my pocket a manuscript, said Dr. James Mortimer. I observed it as you entered the room, said Holmes. It is an old manuscript, early 18th century, unless it's a forgery. How can you say that, sir? You have presented an inch or two of it to my examination, all the time that you have been talking. It would be a poor expert. I would be. Oh, it is, it would be. Lovely. It would be a poor expert who could not give the date of document within a decade or so. You may possibly have read my little monograph upon the subject. I put that at 1730. The exact date is 1742. Mortimer drew in from his breast pocket. This family paper was committed to my care by Sir Charles Baskerville, whose whose sudden and tragic death some 3 months ago created so much excitement in Devonshire. I may as say that I was his personal friend as well as his medical attendant. He was a strong-minded man, sir, shrewd, practical, and as unimaginative as I am myself. Yet he took this document very seriously, and his mind was prepared for just such an end as did eventually overtake him. Holmes stretched out his hand for the manuscript and flared it upon his knee. You will observe, Watson, the alternative use of the long S and the short. It is one of several indications which enable me to fix the date. I looked over his shoulder at the yellow paper and the faded script. At the head was written Baskerville Hall, and below, in large scrawling figures, 1742. It appears to be a statement of some sort. Yes, it is a statement of a certain legend which runs in the Baskerville family. But I understand that it is something more modern and practical upon which you wish to consult me. Ah, hmm. It's a bit difficult to tell when one of them is speaking sometimes when they write it this way. I understand why you do it. Um, but nonetheless. Most modern, a most practical, pressing matter, which must be decided within 24 hours. But the manuscript is short and is intimately connected with the affair. With your permission, I will read it to you. Wrong voice. I'll go back and read it again in the proper one. Most modern, a most practical, pressing matter, which must be decided within 24 hours, but the manuscript is short and is intimately connected with the affair. With your permission, I will read it to you. Holmes leaned back in his chair, placed his fingertips together, and closed his eyes. With an air of resignation, Dr. Mortimer turned the manuscript to the light, and read in a high, cracking voice the following curious old-world narrative. Of the
origin of the Hound of the Baskervilles there have been many statements. Yet as I come in direct line from Hugo Baskerville, and as I had the story from my father, who also had it from his, I have set it down with all belief that it occurred even as in here set forth, and I would have you believe, my sons, that the same justice which punishes sin may also most graciously forgive it, and that no ban is so heavy but that by prayer and repentance it may be removed. Learn then from this story not to fear the fruits of the past, but rather to be circumspect in the future, that these foul passions whereby our family has suffered so grievously may not again be loosed to our undoing. Know then that in time of the great rebellion, the history of which by the lead Lord Clarendon I must earnestly commend to your attention, this manor of Baskerville was held by Hugo of that name, nor can it be against that he was a most wild, profane, and godless man. This, in truth, his neighbours might have pardoned, seeing that saints have never flourished in those parts.
Hmm, where am I? Where am I?
But there was in him a certain wanton and cruel humour which made his name a byword through the West. It chanced that his Hugo came to love, if, indeed, so dark a passion may be known under so bright a name, the daughter of a yeoman, who held lands near the Baskerville estate. But the young maiden, being discreet and of good nature, would ever avoid him, for she feared his evil name. So it came to pass that one Michelam's this Hugo.
I wonder if Michelin's is like, well, it's not a month, but perhaps this is some kind of occasion that happens on a yearly basis. I'm like going Sherlock Holmesing through the Sherlock Holmes novel, trying to figure out what it actually is. I will, on our next read, when we get into part two of this, I'll come back with much more information on the novel itself, and perhaps with more context for us to figure out. This will be great. Um, right now, we're establishing things that we cannot know for sure, and in the future, we can check them, and that'll be quite fun. But yes, indeed. Michaelmas Hugo, with 5 or 6 of his idle and wicked companions, stole down upon the farm and carried off the maiden. Her father and brothers, being from home as well, knew. When they had brought her to the hall, the maiden was placed in an upper chamber, while Hugo and his friends sat down to a long carouse, as was their nightly custom. Now the poor lass upstairs was like to have her wits turned at the singing and shouting, and the terrible oaths which came up to her from below, for they say that the words used by Hugo Baskerville when he was in wine were such as might blast the man who said them. At last, in stress of her fear, she did that which might have daunted the bravest or most active man, for by the aid of the growth of ivy which covered, and still covers, the south wall, she came down from under eaves, and so homeward across the moor, there being 3 leagues the hall betwixt the hall and her father's farm. It chanced some little time later, Hugo left his guests to carry food and drink, with other worse things, perchance, to his captive, and so found the cage empty and the bird escaped. As in, well, this here is a metaphor for my non-English readers. The cage being just the room, and the bird naturally being the woman involved. It's funny how that is still a term commonly used in Britain sometimes, where they'll. It's like the American word for chick, but instead in Britain they kind of just say bird. Um, I think there's a football chant that is along the lines of "You are." Fit, but your birds are fit, which does not refer to the birds themselves. And fit obviously means beautiful in this case.
Then, as it would seem, he became as one that has a devil, for rushing down the stairs into the dining hall, he sprung upon the great table, flagoons and trenches flying before him, and he cried aloud before all the company that he would that very night render his body and soul to the powers of evil, if he might but overtake the wench. And while the revellers stood aghast at the fury of the man, one more wicked, or, it may be, more drunken than the rest, cried out that they should put the hands upon her. Whereat Hugo ran from the house, crying to his grooms that they should settle his mourned mare and unkennel the pack, and giving the hounds a kerchief of the maids, a kerchief, the modern word for that would be handkerchief, so kerchief. The more you know. British language is one that aged really like a lot compared to a lot of other languages. Um, Not all of them, obviously, but like it has changed within very drastically within periods of time, as opposed to I think Ukrainian, for example, is still pretty similar to how it was back in the I don't know very old age. Whereas here, English changes drastically within like a century, and it does that repeatedly. That's why we have Shakespearean scholars and such things who interpret old texts in English, versus scholars interpreting old texts in uh, Slavic languages, which they do have to do that based on context. Um, Also, a lot more often than not, will have the difficulty more with handwriting than with anything else. But that's mostly because I know of the interpretation of text from like Bronze Age and before that. And that involves a lot of writing on walls and wooden planks and what such things, I suppose. It really depends. I suppose by Bronze Age, they don't really have a necessity for writing on walls per se. But the point still stands. Now, for some space, the revellers stood agape and unable to understand all that had been done in such a haste.
Oh, my apologies, I jumped a little bit.
Unkennelled the pack, and giving the hounds a kerchief of the maids, he swung them to the line, and so off full cry in the moonlight over the moor. Now, for some space, the revellers stood agape, unable to understand all that had been done in such a haste.
Ooh, another fun one over here is for some space. I really like the same person because I know that sometimes um, a matter of time kind of feels as if you're just in a matter of space more so. I know it's not making much sense, but please stay with me on this one. Here they use space as in time, so for some time the reveler stood. But it also refers to just standing, I think, in an empty room. Well, empty-ish because no one's, reveling. They kind of stood still. And so there's a space to that time. At least that's my personal interpretation on it with the little context that I have. Very little. But I do like it nonetheless.
Now, for some space, the revellers stood agape, unable to understand all that had been done in such a haste. But anon their bemused wits awoke to nature of the deed, which was like to be done upon the moorlands. Everything was now in an uproar, some calling for their pistols, some for their horses, and some for another flask of wine. But at length some sense came back to their crazed minds, and the whole of them, 13 in number, took horse and started in pursuit. The moon shone clear above them.
Hmm, where are we? Hmm, there.
And they rode swiftly abreast, taking the course which the maid must need have taken if she was to reach her own home.
That's a rather evil deed, I suppose. I do sincerely hope that a large amount of the revelers are simply waking up to the fact that they have suggested something is stupidly evil, for lack of a better term, and are now aiding to perhaps prevent it. That would be great. I would hate to be that woman. Good lord. But that's setting for the curse, I suppose.
They had gone a mile or two when they passed one of the night shepherds upon the moorlands, and they cried to him to know if he had seen the hunt. And the man, as the story goes, was so crazed with fear that he could scarce speak.
I wonder if scarce is scarce because I know it kind of depends. Usually scarce.
The man could scarce speak, but at last he said that he had indeed seen the unhappy maiden with the hounds upon her track. But I have seen more than that, said he. For Hugo Baskerville passed me upon his black mare, and there ran mute behind him such a hound of hell as God forbid should ever be at my heels. So the drunken squires cursed the shepherd and rode onward. But soon their skins turned cold, for there came a galloping across the moor, and the black mare, devilled with the white frost, went past with trailing bridle and empty saddle. Then the revellers rode close together, for a great fear was on them, but they still frowned over the moor.
Followed over the moor. My bad. So what is happening is that they have uh, ridden forward to uh, the trail of, well, the guy on the black mare that had chased them, Hugo. And then now they see the mare frothing at the mouth, running away past them, which is not great after hearing about the scary dog, I suppose.
Then the revellers rode close together, for a great fear was on them, but they still followed over the moor, so each had been alone. Had he been alone, would have been right glad to have turned his horse's head. Riding slowly this fashion, they came at last upon the hounds.
Hounds. How do I pronounce hounds?
On the hounds. These, though known for their valour and their breed, were whimpering in a cluster at the head of the dip or goyle, as we call it, upon the moor, some silking away, and some with starting hackles and staring eyes, gazing down the narrowly valley before them. The company had come to a halt, more sober men, as you may guess, than when they started. The most of them would by no means advance, but three of them, the boldest, or it may be the most drunken, rode forward down the goyle. Now it opened into a broad space in which stood two of these great stones, still to be seen there, which were set by certain forgotten peoples in the days of old. The moon was shining and bright upon the clearing, and there in the centre lay the unhappy maid where she had fallen, dead of fear and of fatigue. But it was not the sight of her body, not yet was it that of the body of Hugo Baskerville.
Sir, my bad. I will also scroll so that I may see more of it. Good God, the paragraph's long.
It was not the sight of her body, nor yet was it the sight of the body of Hugo Baskerville lying near her, which raised the hair upon the heads of these three daredevil roysters, but it was that, standing over Hugo and plucking at his throat, there stood a foul thing, a great black beast, shaped like a hound, yet larger than any hound that ever mortal eye has rested upon. And even as they looked, the thing tore the throat out of Hugo Baskerville, on which, as it turned its blazing eyes and dripping jaws upon them, the three shrieked with fear, and rode for dear life, still screaming across the moor. One, it is said, died that very night of what he had seen, and the other twain were but broken men for the rest of their days.
It does really sound like a campfire horror story, doesn't it? I really like that they use twain for two. I wish that was a word that is still common to use. Can we all start doing that? Can we say twain when we're referring to two people? It's so much like fun. You can say a pair, I guess, but like twain is kind of cool. It's kind of neat. It's kind of neat.
Such is the tale of my sons, of the coming of the Hound, which is said to have plagued the family so sorely ever since. If I have set it down, it is because that which is clearly known has less terror than that which is but hinted at and guessed. Nor can it be denied that many of the family have been unhappy in their deaths, which have been sudden, bloody, and mysterious. Yet may we shelter ourselves in the infinite goodness of Providence, which would not forever punish the innocent beyond that third or fourth generation, which is threatened in Holy Writ. To that Providence, my sons, I hereby commend you, and I counsel you, by way of caution, to forbear from crossing the moor in those dark hours when the powers of evil are exalted. This from Hugo Baskerville to his sons, Roger and John, with instruction that they say nothing thereof to their sister Elizabeth. When Dr. Mortimer had finished reading the singular narrative, he pushed his spectacles up on his forehead and stared across at Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The latter yawned and tossed the end of his cigarette. The latter yawned and tossed the end of his cigarette into the fire. "Well," said he. "Well," said he, "do you not find it interesting?" "To a collector of fairy tales." Dr. Mortimer drew a folded newspaper out of his pocket. "Now, Mr. Holmes, we will give you something a little more recent. This is Devon Country Chronicles of May 14th this year. It is a short account of the facts elicited at the death of Sir Charles Baskerville, which occurred a few days before the date." My friend leaned a little forward, and his expression became intent. Our visitor readjusted his glasses and began.
Good lord, can he not begin? He just finished a sentence like again. Oh well.
The recent sudden death of Sir Charles Baskerville, whose name has been mentioned as the probable Liberal candidate for the mid-Devon at the next election, has cast a gloom over the country. Though Sir Charles had resided at Baskerville Hall for a comparatively short period, his amiability of character and extreme generosity had won the affection and respect of all who had been brought into contact with him. In these days, riches,
No works. I it's almost like a nouveau, but I don't know if it would be. Is it a silent hex? Stressing.
In these days of nouveau riches, it is refreshing to find a case where the scion of an old county family, which had fallen upon evil days, is able to make his own fortune and to bring it back with him to restore
Come back.
the fallen grandeur of his line. Sir Charles, as is well known, made large sums of money in South African speculation.
Oh, good God. I don't think he was a kind man in this time period.
More wise than those who go on until the wheel turns against them, he realized his gains and returned to England with them.
Oh, good God. I wonder if he returned with a portion of the British Museum too. You know, maybe the evil does run in the family. uh, good God. That is hilarious to me. In the way that didn't age, I suppose. I think the book in itself perhaps had, but the narrative is quite amusing from a modern lens. Or yeah, nonetheless. Mm.
It is only 2 years since he took up his residence at Baskerville Hall, and it is common talk how large were those schemes of reconstruction and improvement which have been interrupted by his death. Being himself childless, it was his openly expressed desire that the whole countryside should, within his own lifetime, profit by his good fortune, and many will have personal reasons for bewailing his untimely end. His generous donation to local and country charities have been frequently chronicled in these columns. The circumstances connected with the death of Sir Charles cannot be said to have been entirely cleared up by the inquest, but at least enough has been done to dispose of these rumors to which local superstitions have given rise. There is no reason whatsoever to suspect foul play, or to imagine that death could be from any but natural causes. Sir Charles was a widower, and a man who may be said to have been in some ways of an eccentric habit of mind. In spite of his considerable wealth, he was simple in his personal tastes, and his indoor servants at Baskerville Hall consisted of a married couple named Barrymore, the husband acting as butler and the wife as housekeeper. Their evidence, corroborated by that of several friends, tends to show that Sir Charles' health has for some time been impaired, and points especially to some affection of the heart, manifesting itself in change of color, breathlessness, and acute attack of nervous depression. Dr. James Mortimer, the friend and medical attendant of the deceased, has given evidence to the same effect. The facts of the case are simple. Sir Charles Baskerville was in the habit, every night before going to bed, of walking down the famous yew alley of Baskerville Hall. The evidence of the Barrymore shows that this had been his custom. On the 4th of May, Sir Charles had declared his intention of starting next day for London, and had ordered Barrymore to prepare his luggage. That night he went out as usual for his nocturnal walk, in the course of which he was in the habit of smoking a cigar. He never returned. At 12 o'clock, Barrymore, finding the hall door still open, became alarmed, and lighting a lantern went in search of his master. The day had been wet, and Sir Charles' footmarks were easily traced down the alley. Halfway down this walk there is a gate which leads out into the moor. There were indicators that Sir Charles had stood for some little time here, then proceeded down the alley, and it was at the far end of it that his body was discovered. One fact which has not been explained is the statement of Barrymore that his master's footprints altered their character from the time that he passed gate, the moor gate, and that he appeared from thence onward to have been walking upon his toes. One Murphy, a gypsy horse dealer, was on the moor at no great distance at the time, but he appears by his own confession to have been the worse for drink. He declares that he heard cries, but is unable to state from what direction they came. No signs of violence were to be discovered upon Sir Charles' person, and though the doctor's evidence pointed to an almost incredible facial distortion, so great that Dr. Mortimer refused at first to believe that it was indeed his friend and patient who lay before him, it was explained that that is a symptom which is not unusual in cases of dysphonia. Dysphonia? I think it's dysphonia. I think. I English. English, our beloved language of some, perhaps an I. And death from cardiac exhaustion. This explanation was born out of the post-mortem examination, which showed long-standing organic disease, and the coroner's jury returned a verdict in accordance with the medical evidence. It is well that this is so, for it is obviously of the utmost importance that Sir Charles Mrs. Hare should settle at the Hall and continue the good work which had been so sadly interrupted. Had the prolific finding of the coroner, good lord, had the prosaic, okay, had the prosaic finding of the coroner not finally put an end to the romantic stories which have been whispered in the connections with the affair, it might have been difficult to find a tenant for Baskerville Hall. It is understood that the next of kin is Mr. Henry Baskerville, if he be still alive, the son of Sir Charles Baskerville's youngest brother. The young man, when last heard of, was in America, and inquiries are being instituted with a view to informing him of his good fortune.
Wow, that was a handful. I will quickly grab a good old drink of my tea before I completely lose it. My voice mostly, I don't. The book is okay. What are, if you're still actively listening, what are your, what's to say, uh, opinion on who did it? What are your guesses? Please let me know. Hello. Oh, so in chat, the maid has shown up as a suggestion, perhaps. What do I say that? I was thinking of maybe the butler. Probably not the butler though. I kind of understand the like train of thought here. Because if it's not the butler, and we only know a handful of people at the moment, it could be the maid. Because the maid would like orchestrate the thing, and maybe she, fed him like poison for years to make sure his organs would not look suspicious. That being said, he did have a stroke here, right? That's what it means. I know the medical terminology has changed over time, but I'm suspecting it to be of a stroke. Mm. Because it's a common side effect of stroke is the face distortion thing. God, this reminds me. There's this one board game that exists that I am the owner of, and you can also buy it yourself if you want. Which is the, how do I say this? Uh, I think 95B Street. I forgot. It's a Sherlock Holmes game that is kind of like Cluedo, but worse in every way. I had so much trouble with it as a like person whose English is not my like first language for so long until after like my bajillionth time playing it, I've realized all the answers are just puns, which I suppose is a spoiler. But even with that, it's a bit difficult to understand that on so many levels. So much, genuinely. I was having a difficult time with it. I would be like, oh, I know this thing, and I would not know this thing. I would have no fucking idea. So this could be a very big case of that. I think it would be very entertaining if that's the case. Now to the continuation.
Those are the public facts, Mr. Holmes, in connection with the death of Sir Charles Baskerville.
I hate the name so bad sometimes. Not because the name is a bad, like it's an okay name, but mostly because it trips me up whenever I read it. Baskerville. Baskerville is something.
I must thank you, said Sherlock Holmes, for calling my attention to the case, which certainly presents some features of interest. I had observed some newspaper comment at the time, but I was exceedingly preoccupied by the little affair of the Vatican cameos, and in my anxiety to oblige the Pope, I lost touch with the several interesting English cases. This article, you say, contains all the public facts? It does? Then let it have the private ones. Let me have the private ones. He leaned back and put his fingertips together and assumed this most impassive and judicial expression. In doing so, said Dr. Mortimer, who had begun to show signs of some strong emotion. My apologies. May I have a moment? In doing so, said Dr. Mortimer, who had begun to show signs of some strong emotion, I am telling that which I have not confided to anyone. My motive for withholding it from the coroner's inquiry is that a man of science shrinks from placing himself in the public position of seeming to endorse a popular superstition. I had the further motive, the Baskerville hole, as the paper says, would certainly remain unattended if anything were done to increase its already rather grim reputation. For both these reasons, I thought that I was justified in telling rather less than I knew, since no practical good could result from it. But with you there is no reason why I should not be perfectly frank. The moor is very sparsely inhabited, and those who live there, live near each other, are thrown very much together. Mm, I'll reread that one, for it got a little confusing in sentence. The moor is very sparsely inhabited, and those who live near each other are thrown very much together. For this reason, I saw a good deal of Sir Charles Baskerville, with the exception of Mr. Frankland, of Ladder Hall, and Mr. Stapleton, the naturalist. There are no other men of education within many miles. Sir Charles was a retiring man, but the chance of his illness brought us together, and a community of interests in scientific kept us so. He had brought back much scientific information from South Africa, and many charming evenings we have spent together discussing the comparative anatomy of Bushman and Hottentot. Wow. Hmm. Within the last few months, it became increasingly plain to me that Sir Charles' nervous system was strained to breaking point. He had taken this legend, which I have read to you, exceedingly to heart, so much so that although he would walk in his own grounds, nothing would induce him to go upon the moor at night. Incredible as it may appear to you, Mr. Holmes, he was honestly convinced that a dreadful fate overhung his family, and certainly the records which he was able to give of his ancestors were not encouraging. The idea of some ghastly presence constantly haunted him, and on more than one occasion he has asked me whether I had, on my medical journeys at night, ever seen any strange creature or heard the baying of a hound. The question he put to me several times, and always with a voice which vibrated with excitement. Which, again, as we have talked about in the previous stream, excitement here is not neutrally positive. Here it means a sort of trepidated fear, a very active kind, excitement of that sort. I can well remember driving up to his house in the evening some 3 weeks before the fatal event. He chanced to be at his hall door. I had descended from my gig and was standing in front of him when I saw his eyes fix themselves over my shoulder and stare past me with an expression of the most dreadful horror. I whisked around and had just time to catch a glimpse of something which I took to be a large black cow passing at the head of the drive. So excited and alarmed was he that I was compelled to go down to the spot
I'm scrolling, it is a little bit hard to read.
where the animal had been and look around for it. It was gone, however, and the incident appeared to make the worst impression upon his mind. I stayed with him all the evening, and it was on that occasion, to explain the emotion which he had shown, that he confided to my keeping that narrative which I read to you when first I came. I mention this small episode because it assumes some importance in view of the tragedy which followed, but I was convinced at the time that the matter was entirely trivial and that his excitement had no justification. It was at my advice that Sir Charles was about to go to London. His heart was, I knew, affected, and the constant anxiety in which he lived, however chimerical the cause of it might be, was evidently having a serious effect upon his health. I thought that a few months among the distractions of town would send him back a new man. Mr. Stapleton, a mutual friend who was much concerned at his state of health, was of the same opinion. At the last instant came this terrible catastrophe. On the night of Sir Charles' death, Barrymore, the butler, who made the discovery, sent Perkins, the groom, on horseback to me, and as I was sitting up late, I was able to reach Baskerville Hall within an hour of the event. I checked and corroborated all the facts which were mentioned at the inquest. I followed the footsteps down the yew alley. I saw the spot at the moor gate where he seemed to have waited. I marked the change in the shape of the prints. After that point, I noted that there were no other footsteps save those of Barrymore on the soft gravel, and finally I carefully examined the body, which had not been touched until my arrival. Sir Charles lay on his face, his arms out, his fingers dug into the ground, and his features convulsed with some strong emotion to such an extent that I could hardly have sworn to his identity. There was certainly no physical injury of any kind, but one false statement was made by Barrymore at the inquest. He said that there were no traces upon the ground around the body. He did not observe any, but I did, some little distance off, but fresh and clear. Footprints? Footprints. A man's or a woman's. Dr. Mortimer looked strangely at us for an instant, and his voice sank almost to a whisper as he answered, Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound. And that was, I believe, chapter 1 or 2. Why are we on chapter 3? Hmm. I believe this is also a great place to take a break as we are an hour in, which is what we'll be doing. And as we come back, we will continue with the next chapter. I hope you can have a good break and perhaps also grab a cup of tea. If you're currently engaging with something, maybe let me know what it is if you want to. And if you don't, I hope this has been useful. And we will come back in a good 15 minutes.
Hello. So I'm back. I have gotten a new cup of tea. It is really, really good. I've also ate like 3 cookies. This is a very good break. I should have told you guys to eat some cookies too. That would have been great. Cookies are delightful. Not perhaps they're more like sugar cookies. I think not quite the stuff you see in what's that Korean show about the game with the numbers? Squid Game. There we go. It's not quite those ones. They're actually like soft biscuits. But they're basically the same. I think they're just sugar and maybe flour. I don't know what else is in there, honestly. But you can do a lot with sugar and flour, but like, I have no idea what the actual like reacting agent they used. This might be fun to use. I think it's butter and something though. Probably butter and egg. Because you don't usually mix butter and milk unless you're doing something very specific with it, which these cookies are very simple, so you wouldn't. Um, so yeah, because if you just add butter on its own, they tend to spread out in the oven and kind of like melt and have this like falling apart texture to them, I suppose. But egg is a really good binding agent. That's why you'll use it in baking buns a lot. I like baking, so I feel like that's a good other fun fact to mention. On that account, we may get to the continuation. We are in chapter 3. I completely missed when we turned like over to chapter 2 because it was just at the top of the page and I was too busy trying to find where the next paragraph is. As is often with this type of reading, when it's especially when it's all zoomed in like this, but when it's not zoomed in, it's somehow more difficult to read too. That being said, I kind of like the layout just because it's interesting to look at. It's engaging. Alright, chapter 3 is the problem. I confess, at these words, a shudder passed through me. There was a thrill in the doctor's voice which showed that he was himself deeply moved by that which he told us. Holmes leaned forward in his excitement, and his eyes had the hard, dry glitter which shot from them when he was keenly interested. You saw us? As clearly as I see you. And you said nothing. What was I to use? How was it that no one else saw it? The marks were some 20 yards from the body, and no one gave them a thought. I don't suppose I should have done so had I not known this legend. There are many sheepdogs in the moor? No doubt, but this was no sheepdog. You said it was large. Enormous. But it had not approached the body. No. What sort of night was it? Damp and raw. But not actually raining? No. Was it like... What is the alley like? There were 2 lines of old yew hedge, 12 feet high and impenetrable. The walk in the center is about 8 feet across. Is there anything between the hedges and the walk? Yes, there is a strip of grass about 6 feet broad and on either side. I understand that the yew hedge is penetrated at one point by the gate. Yes, but the wicket gate which leads on to the moor. Is there any other opening? None. So that to reach the yew alley one either has to come down it from the house, or else to enter it by the moor gate. There is an exit through the summer house at the far end. Had Sir Charles reached this? No, he lay about 50 yards from it. Now tell me, Dr. Mortimer, and this is important. The marks which you saw were on the path and not on the grass? No marks could show on the grass. Were they on the same side of the path as the moor gate? Yes, they were on the edge of the path on the same side as the moor gate. You interest me exceedingly. Another point. Was the wicket gate closed?
closed and padlocked. How high was it? About 4 feet high. Then anyone could have gotten over it. Yes. And what marks did you see by the wicket gate? None in particular. Good heaven, did no one examine? Yes, I examined myself. And found nothing? It was all very confused. Sir Charles had evidently stood there for 5 or 10 minutes. How do you know that? Because the ash had twice dropped from his cigar. Excellent. This is a colleague, Watson, after our own heart. But the marks? He had left his own marks all over the small patch of gravel. I could discern no others. Sherlock Holmes struck his hand against his knee with an impatient gesture. If I had only been there, he cried. It is very sorry. It is evidently a case of extraordinary interest, and one which presented immense opportunities to the scientific expert. That page upon which I might have read so much has been lying ere this smudged by the rain and defaced by the clogs of curious peasants. Ah, Dr. Mortimer, to think that you should not have called me in. You have indeed much to answer for. I could not call you in, Mr. Holmes, without disclosing these facts to the world, and I have already given my reasons for not wishing to do so. Besides, besides, why do you hesitate? There is a realm in which the most acute and most experienced of detectives is helpless. You mean that the thing is supernatural? I did not positively say so. No, but you evidently think it. Since the tragedy, Mr. Holmes, there have come to my ears several incidents which are hard to reconcile with the settled order of nature. For example, I find that before the terrible event occurred, several people had seen a creature upon the moor which corresponds with the Baskerville demon, and which could not possibly be any animal known to science. They all agreed that it was a huge creature, luminous, ghastly, and spectral. I had cross-examined these men, one of them a hard-headed countryman, one a farmer, and one a moorland farmer, who all tell the same story of this dreadful apparition, exactly corresponding to the hellhound of the legend. I assure you that there is a reign of terror in the district, and that it is a hardy man who will cross the moor at night. And you, a trained man of science, believe it to be supernatural? I do not know what to believe. Holmes shrugged his shoulders. I have hitherto confirmed my investigation to this world, said he. In a modest way, I have combated evil, but to take on the father of evil himself would, perhaps, be too ambitious a task. Yet you must admit that the footmark is material. The original hound was material enough to tug a man's throat out, and yet he was diabolical as well. So what they're saying for anybody who's struggling to understand what is going on, as I think uh, some would, I personally do understand what's going on, but like as such, I wish to make a little footnote here of exactly what they're discussing within these last two paragraphs, which is that Sherlock Holmes is commenting about how he has solved many crime and that maybe combated evil in a way that is more physical and material. You know, just bad things happening and being done by bad people. Therefore, being those that are more humble, as he has mentioned. And the suggestion here after is that uh, he's making a bit of a joke at the father of evil. It refers to the devil, as they have previously mentioned that. Oh, look, the what's it called? Look, the Count of Baskerville, or
I don't think he was a count. Hugo Baskerville has summoned the demon to chase after this poor lady. Um, and that demon must be the dog that is huge and scary because it's a demon dog. Um, and here, the uh, Sherlock Holmes is saying that, well, he hasn't tried fighting demons yet, but it would certainly make a good postmark for his resume as such. Um, wherein the doctor replies that, well, the demon dog was material enough to kill a guy, at least according to this legend, and therefore should not be spoken of as if it's just like a unmaterial fairy tale or a concept. In the same way that the devil is a concept of Christianity, right? And in the ways that symbolizes evil. And here it's kind of saying that it's not just a symbol of evil; it's an actual dog. Because how else would it kill a man? At least such is their conversation so far. That was rather difficult to explain using the words not already used, in a way. But now we can continue. I hope that was actually helpful to anybody.
I see that you have I see that you have quite gone over to the supernaturalist. Naturalist.
So, I read it right the first time and I messed up.
I see that you have quite gone over to the supernaturalists. But now, Dr. Mortimer, tell me this. If you hold these views, why have you come to consult me at all? You tell me in these same breaths that it is useless to investigate Sir Charles' death, and that you desire me to do it. I did not say that I desired you to do it. Then, how can I assist you? By advising me as to what I should do with Sir Henry Baskerville, who arrives at Waterloo Station. Dr. Mortimer looked at his watch. In exactly 1 hour and a quarter. He being the heir? Yes. And. Not that. Yes. On the death of Sir Charles was. We inquired for this young gentleman and found that he had been farming in Canada, for the accounts which have reached us he is an excellent fellow in every way. From the accounts which have reached us, he is an excellent fellow in every way. I speak not as a medical man, but as a trustee and executor of Sir Charles' will. And there is no other claimant, I presume? None. The only other kinsman whom we have been able to trace was Roger Baskerville, the youngest of the three brothers, of whom poor Sir Charles was the elder. The second brother, who died young, is the father of this lad Henry. The third, Roger, was the black sheep of the family. He came of the old masterful Baskerville strain, and was the very image, they tell me, of the family picture of old Hugo. He made England too hot to hold him, fled to Central America, and died there in 1876 of yellow fever. Henry is the last of the Baskervilles. In 1 hour and 5 minutes I meet him at Waterloo Station. I have had a wire that he arrived at
Oh God, my lord, Southampton, Southampton. Is the M silent? Southampton, South. Oh Lord, please understand why this is causing such a reaction. Me to read the name. It's difficult. It's like finding out how to read Worcester sauce again. Worcester. It's horrible.
at Southampton this morning. Now, Mr. Holmes, what would you advise me to do with him? Why should he not go to the home of his fathers? It seems natural, does it not? And yet considers that every Baskerville who goes there meets with an evil fate. I feel sure that if Sir Charles could have spoken with me before his death, he would have warned me against bringing the last of the old race and their heir to great wealth, to that deadly place. And yet it cannot be denied that the prosperity of the whole poor, bleak countryside depends upon his presence. All the good work which has been done by Sir Charles will crash to the ground if there is no tenant of the whole. I fear least I fear lest I should be swayed too much by my own obvious interest in the matter, and that is why I bring the case before you and ask for your advice. Holmes considered for a little time. Put into plain words, the matter is this, said he. In your opinion, there is a diabolical agency which makes Dartmoor an unsafe abode for Baskerville. That is your opinion? At least I might go to the length of saying that there is some evidence that this may be so. Exactly. But surely, if you supernatural theory be correct, it could work. The young man evil in London as easily as in Devonshire. A devil was merely local powers like perish vastly. Hmm, I will reread that title. Exactly. But surely, if his supernatural theory be correct, it could work the young man evil in London as easily as in Devonshire. A devil with merely local powers, like a parish vestry, would be too inconceivable a thing.
I do quite like that. It's quite fun. Also, great use of local as in the same way that we currently use it when we talk about local co-op, which is to say limited to a physical place. A particular one, I suppose.
You put the matter more flippantly, Mr. Holmes, than you would probably do if you were brought into personal contact with these things. Your advice, then, as I understand it, is the young man will be safe in Devonshire as in London. He comes in 50 minutes. What would you recommend? I recommend, sir, that you take a cab, call off your spaniel, who is scratching at my front door, and proceed to Waterloo to meet Sir Henry Baskerville. And then? And then you will say nothing to him at all until I have made up my mind about the matter. How long will it take you to make up your mind? 24 hours. At 10 o'clock tomorrow. Dr. Mortimer, I will be much obliged to you if you will call upon me here, and it will be of help to me in my plans for the future if you will bring Sir Henry Baskerville with you. I will do so, Mr. Holmes. He scribbled the appointment on his shirt cuff and hurried off in his strange, peering, absent-minded fashion. Holmes stopped him at the head of the stair. Only one more question, Dr. Mortimer. You say that before Sir Charles Baskerville's death, several people saw the apparition upon the moor? 3 people did. Did any see it after? I have not heard of any. Thank you. Good morning. Holmes returned to his seat with that quiet look of inward satisfaction, which meant that he had congenial tasks before him. Going out, Watson? Unless I can help you. No, my dear fellow. It is at the hour of action that I turn to you for aid. But this is splendid, really unique from some points of view. When you pass Bradley's, would you ask him to send up a pound of strongest shag tobacco? Thank you. It would be as well if you could make it convenient not to return before evening. Then I should be very glad to compare impressions as to this most interesting problem which has been submitted to us this morning. I knew that seclusion and solitude were very necessary for my friend in these hours of intense mental concentration, during which he weighed every particle of evidence, constructed alternative theories, balanced one against the other, and made up his mind as to which points were essential and which immaterial. I therefore spent the day at my club, and did not return to Baker Street until evening. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I found myself in a sitting room once more.
I wanted to make a small note. Mostly if we're discussing the book, we might as well discuss the writing style. I think this is a very good thing to point out for if you're writing detectives and trying to write a smart character, is to even I think giving Sherlock Holmes slight flaws was really good. At the start, when the man came in and they were deducting who the man was, there was the example of the obvious and, deduction number one, which a viewer might have, and if the viewer or reader, I suppose, in this case, didn't agree with deduction number one, having a deduction number two that is more interesting, maybe bringing out facts they haven't considered. For example, I was unaware of what the cross station is in England because I did not live in England or haven't lived in England at that point in time, and therefore this particular point of information would have been immaterial to me. And lastly, having some of these theories be correct, but also having some of these theories be wrong was, I think, a very high point because that shows that the entire book is not just you, the reader, feeling stupid. It is genuine. It feels like a genuine curiosity towards discovery in that kind of way, where it's not a straight line of, oh, everything was figured out before we started. Those books can also be interesting, of course, but mostly as tragedies, I believe. Now I will scroll forward. My first impression as I opened the door was that a fire had broken out, for the room was so filled with smoke that a light of the lamp upon the table was blurred by it. As I entered, however, my fears were set at rest, for it was the acrid fumes of strong coarse tobacco which took me by the throat and set me coughing. Through the haze I had a vague vision of Holmes in his dressing gown, coiled up on an armchair with his black clay pipe between his lips. Several rolls of paper lay around him. Caught a cold, Watson? No, it's this poisonous atmosphere. I suppose it is pretty sick, now that you mention it. Sick. It's intolerable. Open the window then. You have been at your club all day, I perceive? My dear Holmes. Am I right? Certainly, but how? He laughed at my bewildered expression. There's a delightful freshness about you, Watson, which makes it a pleasure to experience any small powers which I possess at your expense. A gentleman goes forth on a showery and miry day. He returns immaculate in the evening with gloss still on his hat and his boots. He has been a fixture, therefore, all day. He is not a man with intimate friends. Where, then, could he have been? Is it not obvious? Well, it is rather obvious. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Where do you think that I have been? A fixture also? On the contrary, I have been to Devonshire. In spirit. Exactly. My body has remained in this armchair and has, I regret to observe, consumed in my absence 2 large parts of coffee and an incredible amount of tobacco. After you left, I sat down to Stamford's for the ordnance map of this portion of the moor, and my spirit has hovered over it all day. I flattered myself that I could find my way out. A large-scale map, I presume? Very large. He unrolled one section and held it over his knee. Here you have the particular district which concerns us. This is Baskerville Hall in the middle. With the wood around it? Exactly. I fancy the yew alley, though not marked under that name, must stretch along this line, with the moor, as you perceive, upon the right of it. This small clump of buildings here is the hamlet of Gimpen, where our friend Dr. Mortimer has his headquarters. Within a radius of 5 miles there are, as you see, only very few scattered dwellings. Here is Laughter Hole, which was mentioned in the narrative. There is a house indicated here, which may be the residence of the naturalist Stapleton, if I remember right. What's his name?
Here are two moorland farmhouses, Hightor and Fomar. Then, 14 miles away, is the great convict prison of Princetown. Between and around these scattered points extends the desolate, lifeless moor. This, then, is the stage upon which tragedy has been played, and upon which we may help to play it again. It must be a wild place. Yes, the setting is a worthy one. If the devil did desire to have a hand in the affairs of men, then you are yourself inclining to the supernatural explanation? The devil's agents may be of flesh and blood, may they not? There are two questions waiting for us at the outset. The one is whether any crime has been committed at all. The second is whether it is a crime and how it was it committed. Of course, if Dr. Mortimer's surmise should be correct, and we are dealing with forces outside of the ordinary laws of nature, there is an end of our investigation. But we are bound to exhaust all other hypotheses before falling back upon this one. I think we'll shut that window again, if you don't mind. It is a singular thing, but I find that concentrating atmosphere helps a concentration of thought. I have not pushed it to the length of getting into a box to think, but this is the logical outcome of my convictions. Have you turned the case over in your mind? Yes, I have thought a good deal of it in the course of the day. What do you make of it?
Is at this point I should also mention some more plot points that I was thinking about as I was reading. One of which is another point to why it could be the maid or the perhaps the butler and such is mostly if the maid has done well. They have access to a lot of if they have time. If they don't, because there's only two of them. It's okay. I was thinking maybe they like set up the footprints and they're not real. Because medieval times, however. Well, okay, this is not medieval, but you get the idea. And on the other hand, they'd have to be really prepared to call them to come within like maybe an hour, because maybe it's a very long distance, and one wouldn't normally be able to do that unless they knew exactly, like, had a head start on it. Especially because you had to go and find the person, be prepared for everything else. But if you're already prepared, then that cuts down time a lot, and then you can set up a fake crime scene that looks spotless, you know, because you're expecting and you're calling, and nobody's gonna suspect you because you called the doctor. Perhaps. The other idea I have is that these two friends and roommates are quite close. That's the end of that sentence. I do enjoy the dynamic of it. I think. Mm. I think that's what makes actually a really good character as well. That and this also reminds me of the board game I kept playing because it also had identified goals for the crime committed, and in order to win the game, you had to identify and answer them.
What do you make of it?
It is very bewildering.
It has certainly a character of its own. There are points of distinction about it. That change in the footprints, for example. What do you make of that?
Um, Mortimer said that the man had walked on tiptoe down the portion of the alley.
He only repeated what some fool had said at the inquest. Why should a man walk on tiptoe down the alley?
What then?
He was running, Watson. Running desperately, running for his life. Running until he burst his heart and fell dead upon his face.
Running from what?
There lies our problem. There are indications that the man was crazed with fear before he even began to run.
How can you say that?
I'm presuming that the cause of his fears had come to him across the moor. If that were so, and it seems most probable, only a man who had lost his wits would have run from the house instead of towards it. If the gypsy's evidence may be taken as true, he ran with cries for help in a direction where help was least likely to be. Then, again, whom was he waiting for that night? And why was he waiting for him in the U alley rather than in his own house?
Oh, that's so cool. That's interesting. I like that.
You think that he was waiting for someone? The man was elderly and infirm. We can understand his taking an evening stroll, but the ground was damp and the night inclement. Is it natural that he should stand for 5 or 10 minutes as Dr. Mortimer, with more practical sense than I should have given him credit for, deduced for the cigar ash? From the cigar ash? But he went out every evening. I think it is unlikely that he waited at the moor gate every evening. On the contrary, the evidence is that he avoided the moor. That night he waited there. It was the night before he made his departure for London. This thing takes shape, Watson. It comes coherent. Might I ask you to hand me my violin, and we will postpone all further thought upon this business until we have had the advantage of meeting Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville in the morning.
And that is the end of chapter 3. I like the ending of the violin thing because it implies that they like in this absolute smoke room where a person's survival is really under question. I think personally, at least the long-term survival of the lungs, if not short-term, for Watson, they're going to play the violin, and the fact that he's probably playing it for Watson because Watson can't really play it as issue. It's his violin after all. That is hilarious, especially with the image of like Sherlock Holmes still in his gown or whatever. That's so funny to me. But also like such a homely atmosphere ending in a way, while also being intriguing enough to keep reading. See, this is why a classic is so good. Honestly, like part of it is the age within which it kind of goes. You get a glimpse of the universe you haven't quite lived, perhaps. Perhaps it's the age, perhaps it's the actual writing. But it's nice. I like unpredictable things, I suppose.
Our breakfast table was cleared early, and Holmes waited in his dressing gown
Again.
for the promised interview. Our clients were punctual to their appointment, for the clock had just struck 10 when Dr. Mortimer was shown up, followed by the young baronet. The latter was a small, alert, dark-eyed man, about 30 years of age, very sturdily built, with thick black eyebrows and a strong, pugnacious face. He was a ruddy-tinted tweed. He wore a ruddy-tinted tweed suit, and had the weather-beaten appearance of one who had spent most of his time in the open air. And yet there was something in his steady eye and the quiet assurance of his bearing which indicated the gentleman. "This is Sir Henry Baskerville," said Dr. Mortimer.
Oh god, I'm gonna have to come up with another voice. Why is there like 4 men in here? I don't know what a Canadian accent is like. I have actually no idea accents. I can't tell accents apart, so. You're just gonna have to believe me, I guess. Or guess, I don't know.
"Why, yes," said he, "and the strange thing is, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, that if my friend here had not proposed coming around to you this morning, I should have come on my own account. I understand that you think our little puzzles, and I've had once this morning which wants more thinking out than I am able to give it. Pray take a seat, Sir Henry. Do I understand you to say that you have yourself had some remarkable experience since you arrived in London?" "Nothing much of importance," said Mr. Holmes. "Only a joke, as likely as not. It was this letter, if you can call it a letter, which reached me this morning." He laid an envelope upon the table, and we all bent over it. It is of common quality, greyish in colour. The address, "Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hotel," was printed in rough characters. The postmark, Charing Cross on the date of posting the preceding evening. You knew that you were going to get to the north. Who knew that you were going to the Northumberland Hotel? Asked Holmes, glancing keenly across to our visitor. No one could have known. We only decided after I met Dr. Mortimer. But Dr. Mortimer was no doubt already stopping there? No, I have been staying with a friend. Oh, sir. No, I have been staying with a friend, said the doctor. There was no possible indication that we intended to go to this hotel. Hmm. Someone seems to be very deeply interested in your movements. Out of the envelope, he took a half sheet of foolscap. Foolscap. I've never heard of this paper. Out of the envelope, he took half a sheet of foolscap paper folded into four. This he opened and spread flat upon the table. Across the middle of it, a single sentence had been formed by the expedient pasting printed words upon it. It ran, as you value your life or your reason, keep away from the moor. The word more only was printed in ink.
I must confess, I'm not entirely certain. Most of the time, they say when something is printed in ink and all, they mean that it was written. However, the implication of this ink specifically makes me wonder whether the rest of it has been written in pencil, because I was under the assumption that perhaps there's been a cutout. I think we should understand from context clues in the future.
What do you take of it, Dr. Mortimer? You must allow there is nothing supernatural about this at any rate. No, sir, but it might very well come from someone who was convinced that the business is supernatural. What business? Asked Sir Henry sharply. It seems to me that all you gentlemen know a great deal more than I do about my own affairs. You shall share our knowledge before you leave this. You shall share our knowledge before you leave this room, Sir Henry. I promise you that. You shall share our knowledge before you leave this room, Sir Henry. I promise you that, said Sherlock. We will confine ourselves, for the present, with your permission, to this very interesting document, which must have been put together and posted yesterday evening. Have you yesterday's Times, Watson?
Yes, I knew it. It was from the newspaper. All was cut out from the newspaper except for the word more, which was actually written in ink, hence the printed part. Huzzah! It's so good to figure this out. Isn't it good to have me read it so that you also understand what's going on? Isn't it grand?
It is here in this corner. Might I trouble you for it? The inside page, please, with the leading articles. He glanced swiftly over it, running his eyes up and down the columns. Capital articles, this, and free trade. Permit me to give you an extract from it. You may be cajoled into imagining that your own special trade or your own industry will be encouraged by a protective tariff, but it stands to reason that such legislation must, in the long run, keep away wealth from the country, diminish the value of our imports, and lower the general conditions of life in this island. What do you think of that, Watson? Cried Holmes in high glee, rubbing his hands together in satisfaction. Don't you think that is an admirable sentiment? Dr. Mortimer looked at Holmes with an air of professional interest, and Sir Henry Baskerville turned a pair of puzzled dark eyes upon me. I don't know much about the tariff and things of that kind. Oh, I don't know much about the tariff and things of that kind, said he. But it seems to me we've got a bit of the trail as far as the note is concerned. On the contrary, I think we are particularly hot upon the trail, Sir Henry. Watson, here knows more about my methods than you do, but I fear that even he is not quite grasped the significance of this sentence.
You know what this is making me realize? I watched the Sonic 2 the other day, and I want to watch Sonic 3 at one point. And there's for those of you who have watched it, there's that relationship between Robotnik and Agent Stone of the villain and the sidekick, I suppose, that is just very similar here in some aspects. I wonder if they were inspired by Sherlock Holmes. That'd be hilarious. And also really good. Like, yeah, get inspired by Sherlock Holmes. Do that. I'm so lucky to not have watched any of the, like, Sherlock Holmes movies, my lord. Imagine my sentence would not sound the same.
Now I confess that I see no connection. And yet, my dear Watson, there is so very close connection that one is extracted out of the other. You, your life, reason, value, keep away from the. Don't you see now where these words have been taken?
By thunder, you're right. Well, if that isn't smart, cried Sir Henry.
If any possible doubt remained, it is settled by the fact that keep away and from the are cut out in one piece. Well, now, so it is. Really, Mr. Holmes. Well, now, so it is. Really, Mr. Holmes, this exceeds anything which I could have imagined, said Dr. Mortimer, gazing at my friend in amazement. I could understand anyone saying that the words were from a newspaper, but that you should name which, and add that it came from the leading article, is really one of the most remarkable things which I have ever known. How did you do it? I presume, doctors, that you could tell the skull.
Guys, I can't say that word. Uh,
From that of an Esquimau.
oh god, I can't say that one either. Good thing I didn't pronounce it right. Good lord. How the times. Back in the day, back in the day, Britain was Britain. And now it still is. But now it sucks. Because we know that it's Britain. Oh, help me. Alright.
Most certainly. But how? Because that is my special hobby. The differences are obvious. The supraorbital crest, the facial angle, the maxillary curve, the.
Oh my god. I. Sorry, I'm having like internet flashbacks. To a time. Not to a time, actually, to a place. It's. Let's. Let's move on. He was talking about the skull comparisons between people at the time from about like African regions versus people from like regions close to the North Pole, for example, like really close. So people who live always in the summer or the winter. For some reason, he's examined their skulls and written, or at least knows their differences off by heart, and can like tells them upon view, apparently. So yeah, that's what that was about.
But this is my special hobby, and the differences are equally obvious. There's as much difference to my eyes between the lead bourgeoisie type of Times articles and the slovenly print of an evening halfpenny paper as there could be between your and your.
People and people, I suppose.
The detection type, the detection, the detection of types is one of the most elementary branches of knowledge to the special expert in crime. Though I confess that once, when I was very young, I confused the Leeds Mercury with the Western Morning News. But the Times leader is entirely distinctive, and those words could have been taken from nothing else. As it was done yesterday, the strong probability that we should find the words in yesterday's issue. So far as I can follow you, then, Mr. Holmes. Sorry. So far as I can follow you, then, Mr. Holmes, said Sir Henry Baskerville. Someone cut out this message with scissors. Nail scissors, said Holmes. You can see that it was very short-bladed scissors, since the cutter had taken 2 snips over "keep away." That is so. Someone then cut out the message with a pair of short-bladed scissors, pasted it with paste gum, said Holmes, with gum on the paper, but I want to know why the word more should have been written. Because they could not find it in the print. The other words were all simple and might be found in any issue, but more would be less common. Why, of course, that would explain it. Have you read anything else in the message, Mr. Holmes? There are 1 or 2 indications, and yet the utmost pains have been taken to remove all clues. The address you observe is printed in rough characters, but the Times is a paper which is seldom found in any hands but those of the highly educated. We may take it, therefore, that the letter was composed by an educated man who wished to pose as an uneducated one, and his effort to conceal his own writing suggests that the writing might be known, or to come to be known by you. Again, you will observe that the words are not gummed on in an accurate line, but that some are much higher than others. Life, for example, is quite out of its proper place. That may point to carelessness, or it may point to agitation and hurry upon the part of the cutter. On the whole, I incline to the latter view, since the matter was evidently important, and it is unlikely that the composer of such letter would be careless. If you are in a hurry, it opens up the interesting question why he should be in a hurry, since any letter posted up to early morning would reach Sir Henry before he would leave his hotel. Did the composer fear an interruption, and from whom? We're coming now rather into a region of guesswork, said Dr. Mortimer. Say, rather, into a region where we balance probabilities and choose the most likely. It is the scientific use of the imagination, but we have always some material basis on which to start our speculation. Now, you would call it a guess, no doubt, but I am almost certain that this address has been written in a hotel. How in the world could you say that? If you examine it carefully, you will see that both the pen and the ink have given the writer trouble. The pen has spluttered twice in a single word, and has run dry 3 times in a short address, showing that there was very little ink in the bottle. Now, a private pen or ink bottle is seldom allowed to be in such a state, and the combination of the two must be quite rare. But you know the hotel ink and the hotel pen, where it is rare to get anything else. Yes, I have very little hesitation in saying that could we examine the waste paper basket of the hotels around Charing Cross until we found the remains of the mutilated Times leader, we could lay our hands straight upon the person who sent this singular message. Hello, hello, what's this? He was carefully examining the foolscap upon which the words were posted, holding it only an inch from his eyes. Well, well, nothing, said he, throwing it down. It is a blank half sheet of paper, without even a watermark upon it. I think we have drawn as much as we can from this curious letter. And now, Sir Henry, has anything else interest happened to you since you have been in London? Why, no, Mr. Holmes, I think not. You have not observed anyone follow or watch you? I seem to have walked right into the sick of dime novel, said our visitor. Why in thunder should anyone follow or watch me? We are coming to that. You have nothing else to report to us before we go into this matter? Well, it depends on upon what you think is worth reporting. I think anything out of the ordinary routine of life well worth reporting. Sir Henry smiled. I don't know much of British life yet, for I have spent nearly all my time in States and in Canada, but I hope that to lose one of your boots is not part of the ordinary routine of life over there. You have lost one of your boots? My dear sir, cried Dr. Mortimer, it is only misled. You will find it when you return to the hotel. What is the use of troubling Mr. Holmes with a trifle of this kind? God, do you think the doctor did it? He's too defensive. Uh, I'm not really good at detective novels, but nonetheless, it is very entertaining to guess as you go. I think that's part of the appeal. Hmm. Well, he asked me if anything outside the ordinary. Sir. Well, he asked me for anything outside the ordinary routine. Exactly, said Holmes. However foolish incident may seem, you have lost one of your boots, you say? Well, misled it anyhow. I put them both outside of my door last night, and there was only one in the morning. I could get no sense out of the chap who cleans them. The worst of it is that I only bought the pair last night in Strand, and I have never had them on. If you have never worn them, why did you put them out to be cleaned? They were tan boots, and had never been varnished. That was why I put them out. Then I understand on your arrival in London yesterday, you went out at once and bought a pair of boots. I did a good deal of shopping, Dr. Mortimer. I did a good deal of shopping. Dr. Mortimer here went around with me. You see, if I am to be a squire down there, I must dress the part, and it may be that I have got a little careless in my ways out west. Among other things, I bought these brown boots, gave $6 for them, and had one stolen before I had them on my feet. It seems a singularly useless thing to steal, said Sherlock Holmes. I confess that I share Dr. Mortimer's belief that it will not be long before the missing boot is found. And now, gentlemen, said the baronet with decision, it seems to me that I have spoken quite enough about the little that I know. It is time that you kept your promise and gave me a full account of what we are all driving at. Your request is a very reasonable one, Holmes answered. Dr. Mortimer, I think you could not do better than to tell the story as you told it to us. Thus encouraged, our scientific friend drew his papers from his pocket and presented the whole case as he had done upon the morning before. Sir Henry Baskerville listened with the deepest attention, and with an occasional exclamation of surprise. No, it couldn't have been the doctor, because, the doctor wouldn't have needed to call Sherlock Holmes. There would be no need for it. Perhaps an acquaintance or someone we haven't met yet. That would be weird. It can't be either of those. Because then it's usually somebody you establish the start, right? Normally, they wouldn't do a surprise one. But then again, it wouldn't be a surprise if it's laid out, context clues that we just can't gather at the moment because the book is old. Hmm. One moment, I'll have a drink. The tea was lovely. Now, well, I seem to have come into an inheritance with. I've been, sir. Well, I seem to have come into an inheritance with a vengeance, said he when the long narrative was finished. Of course, I've heard of the hound ever since I was in the nursery. It's the pet story of the family, though I've never thought of taking it seriously before. But as to my uncle's death, well, it seems boiling up in my head, and I can't get clear yet. You don't seem quite to have made up your mind whether it's a case of policeman or clergyman. Precisely. And now there's this affair of the letter to me at the hotel. I suppose that fits into its place. It seems to show that someone knows more than we do about what goes up at the moor, said Dr. Mortimer. And also, said Holmes, that someone is not ill disposed towards you, since they warned you of the danger. Or it may be that they wish for their own purposes, sorry, or it may be that they wish for their own purposes to scare me away. Well, of course, that is a possibility also. I'm very much indebted to you, Dr. Mortimer, for introducing me to a problem which presents several interesting alternatives. But the practical point which we now have to decide, Sir Henry, is whether it is or is not advisable for you to go to Baskerville Hall. Why should I not go? There seems to be danger. Do you mean danger from this family friend, or do you mean danger from human beings? Well, this is what we have to find out. Whichever it is, my answer is fixed. There is no devil in hell, Mr. Holmes, and there is no man upon earth who can prevent me from going to the home of my own people, and you may take that to be my final answer. His dark brows knitted, and his face flushed to a dusky red as he spoke. It was evident that the fiery temper of Baskervilles was not extinct in their last representative. Meanwhile, said he, uh, I think is he Holmes? I don't think so. Meanwhile, said he, I have hardly had time to think over all that you have told me. It's a big thing for a man to have to understand and decide at one sitting. I should like to have a quiet hour by myself to make up my mind. Now, look here, Mr. Holmes. It's past half 11 now, and I'm going back right away to my hotel. Suppose you and your friend, Dr. Watson, come around and lunch with us too. I'll be able to tell you more clearly then how this thing strikes me. Is that convenient to you, Watson? Perfectly. Then you may expect us. Shall I have a cab called? I'd prefer to walk for this affair has flurried me rather. For this affair has flurried me rather. For those of you watching at home, for in this case is used as because. It is very common. As someone who's learned English through reading this sort of literature, also used for very often as a substitute for because. I am not quite sure how often it appears in academic literature, where I know a lot of formal writing goes, and formal writing tends to take on the qualities of Old English at times, just as a way of substituting and making things more official sounding, I suppose. Longer words, more variety of them, more objective words is the general idea, but it is the idea that I believe personally from no experience whatsoever to have come from reading something that is perhaps a bit older than you are and not realizing the emotional context of it. I can often hear it when people voice act or read over books where it doesn't quite sound right to me because it doesn't sound like how normal people would have said that line. But if you had no reference of how normal people would say that line, that is perhaps how you would voice act it. I think very similar things can often be said about reading classical literature, or listening to it read, nonetheless. And so, in that, I think it has lost its emotion and has become objective language where usually it would not have been. I think similar points have been made by Shakespearean scholars about Shakespearean comedies and tragedies, I suppose. Although I don't think any tragedy is quite without comedy when it's Shakespeare. I'll join you in a walk with pleasure, said his companion. Hmm, no. Oh, I read them. Again, it doesn't say who says what. So I will simply go back and start with where I last left. Is that convenient to you, Watson? Perfectly. Then you may expect us. Shall I have a cab called? I'd prefer to walk, for this affair has rather flustered me. Has flustered me, rather. I'll join you in a walk with pleasure, said his companion. No, it still makes no sense. Well, we can go with my first reading and call it a day. Then we meet again at 2 o'clock. Au revoir and good morning. We heard the steps of our visitors descend the stairs, and the bang of the front door. In an instant, Holmes had changed from languid dreamer to the man of action. Your hat and boots, Watson, quick! Not a moment to lose. He rushed into his room in his dressing gown, and was back again in a few seconds, in a frock coat. We hurried together down the stairs and into the street. Dr. Mortimer and Baskerville were still visible about 200 yards ahead of us, in the direction of Oxford Street. Shall I run on and stop them? Not for the world, my dear Watson. I am perfectly satisfied with your company if you will tolerate mine. Our friends are wise, for it is certainly a very fine morning for a walk. He quickened his pace until we had decreased the distance which divided us by about half. Then, still keeping 100 yards behind, we followed into Oxford Street and so down Regent Street. Once our friend stopped and stared into a shop window, which Holmes did the same. An instant afterwards he gave a little cry of satisfaction, and, following the direction of his eager eyes, I saw that a hansom cab with a man inside, which had halted on the other side of the street, was now proceeding slowly onwards again. There's that man, Watson. Come along. We'll have a good look at him, if we can do no more. At that instant I was aware of a bushy black beard and a pair of piercing eyes turned upon us through the side window of the cab. Instantly the trapdoor at the top flew up, and something was screamed at to the driver. And something was screamed to the driver, and the cab flew madly off down Regent Street. Holmes looked eagerly around for another cab, but no empty one was in sight. Then he dashed in wild pursuit amidst a stream of traffic, but the start was too great, and already the cab was out of sight. There now, said Holmes bitterly, as he emerged panting and white and with vexation from the tide of vehicles. Was ever such a bad luck and such bad management too? Watson, Watson, if you are an honest man, you will record this also, and set it against my success. Who was the man? I have no idea. I have not an idea. A spy? Well, it was evident from what we have heard that Baskerville has been very closely shadowed by someone since he has been in town. How else could it be known so quickly that it was the Northumberland Hotel which he had chosen? If they had followed him the first day, I argued that they would follow him also the second. You may have observed that I twice strolled over to the window while Dr. Mortimer was reading his legend. Yes, I remember. I was looking out for loiterers in the street, but I saw none. We are dealing with a clever man, Watson. This matter cuts very deep, and though I have not finally made up my mind whether it is a benevolent or malevolent agency which is in touch with us, I am conscious always of power and design. When our friends left, I at once followed them in the hopes of marking down their invisible attendant. So wily was he that he had not trusted himself upon foot, but he had avoided himself. Sorry. But he had availed himself of a cab so that he could loiter behind or dash past them, and so escape their notice. This method had the additional advantage that if they were to take a cab, he was all ready to follow them. It has, however, one obvious disadvantage. It puts him in the power of the cabman. Exactly. What a pity we did not get the number. My dear Watson, clumsy as I have been, you surely do not seriously imagine I neglected to get number. Number 2704 is our man.
Could have been 2704 too. Who knows?
But that is no use to us for the moment. I failed to see how you could have done more. On observing the cab, I should have instantly turned and walked in the other direction. I should then, at my leisure, have hired a second cab and followed the first at a respectable distance. Or better still, have driven to the north of Berlin to the Northumberland Hotel
Honestly, it's a miracle
and waited there.
it only took me like 5 times reading it before I finally stumbled this bad on it. Honestly, it's a miracle that I did that so well until now. It's such a long word. It's the best kind.
When our unknown had followed Baskerville home, we should have had the opportunity of playing his own game upon himself and seeing where he made for. As it is, by an indiscreet eagerness, which was taken advantage of with extraordinary quickness and energy by our opponent, we have betrayed ourselves and lost our man. We had been sauntering slowly down Regent Street during this conversation, and Dr. Mortimer, with his companion, had long vanished in front of us.
Another point on writing detectives that I find this one to be really good for is that you don't write flawless characters, and even as like flawless as Sherlock Holmes can be portrayed because Watson loves him. Um, the what was it called? Even as flawed as he's portrayed because it's from Watson's point of view, um, he still has flaws, and those flaws are just things that do not come from intelligence, which can also be quite cool, and they impact his intelligence, which is very neat, I think. So like he gets excited about the case because he loves them. Excitement can on occasion impact him, but he still has. I do like that because he does the same thing that I would have done in a situation where something unprecedented has happened, a sudden, which is at least you take notice of what's going on, so that you can later reconcile it and see what happens. So he did the bare minimum improvisation. It also is neat because he's not just like this mastermind character in a way. He is, but like I do appreciate the physicality of it, of improvisation being a part of it. It makes the story feel more alive on occasion.
There is no object in our following them, said Holmes. The shadow has departed and will not return. We must see what further cards we have in our hands and play them with decision. Could you swear to that man's face within the cab?
I could swear only to the beard.
And so could I, from which I gather that in all probability it was a false one. A clever man upon so delicate an errand has no use for a beard save to conceal his features. Come in here, Watson.
Ooh, a fake beard. That's cool.
He turned into one of the district messenger offices, where he was warmly greeted by the manager. Ah, Wilson, I see you have not forgotten the little case in which I had the good fortune to help you. No, sir, indeed I have not. You saved my good name and perhaps my life. My dear fellow, you exaggerate. I have some recollection, Wilson, that you had among your boys a lad named Cartwright, who showed some ability during the investigation. Yes, sir, he is still with us. Could you ring him up? Thank you. And I should be glad to have change of this £5 note. A lot of wow, that makes sense. A lad of 14, with bright, keen face, had obeyed the summons of the manager. He stood now, gazing with great reverence at the famous detective. Let me have the sorry. Let me have the hotel directory, said Holmes. Thank you. Now, Cartwright, there are names of 23 hotels here, all in the immediate neighborhood of Charing Cross. Do you see? Yes, sir. You will visit each of them in turn. Yes, sir.
What changes because I realizing it was a child. Um,
You will tell him that you want to see the waste paper of yesterday. You will say that an important telegram has miscarried and that you are looking for it. You understand? Yes, sir. But what you are really looking for is the center page of Times with some holes cut in it with scissors. Here is a copy of the Times. It is this page. You could easily recognize it, could you not? Yes, sir. In each case, the outside porter will send for the hall porter, to whom also you will give a shilling. Here are 23 shillings. You will then learn in possibly 20 cases out of the 23 that the waste of the day before has been burned or removed. In these, in the three other cases, you will be shown a heap of paper, and you will look for this page of the Times among it. The odds are enormous against you finding it. There are 10 shillings over in case of emergencies. Let me have a report by wire at Baker Street before evening.
oh, it was like 23 Baker Street or something. I think the name of the game, the board game.
And now, Watson, it only remains for us to find out by wire the identity of the cabman, number 2704, and then we will drop into one of the Bond Street picture galleries and fill in the time until we are due at the hotel.
We're now 22 pages in. It's about we're on chapter 4 now, so as I believe each page is single about 5 pages. Yeah, one, two, three, four, five, until the next one. Damn, that's a very orderly layout for it actually. I was not expecting it to be that exact. Because chapters usually are not, are they? Suppose. Mhm. And then we'll be at a halfway point where I think we can perhaps end. So, chapter 5, Three Broken Threads.
Sherlock Holmes had, in a very remarkable degree, the power of detaching his mind at will. For 2 hours the strange business in which we had been involved appeared to be forgotten, and he was entirely absorbed in the pictures of modern Belgian masters.
Oh my god, they went to the gallery. Sorry, it's sweet. I love when the downtime is described briefly and it's an interesting one that kind of like makes the setting more alive. That's so neat.
He would talk of nothing but art, of which he had the crudest ideas, from our leaving the gallery until we found ourselves at the Northberland Hotel. Sir Henry Baskerville is upstairs expecting you, said the clerk. He asked me to show you up at once when you came. Have you any objections to my looking at your register? Said Holmes. Not in the slightest. The book showed that two names had been added after that of Baskerville. One was Theophilus Johnson and family, of Newcastle; the others Miss Aldmore and maid, of High Lodge, Alton.
That's why the fake beard. Maybe that's my theories. That's why the fake beard.
Surely that must be some Johnson whom I used to know, said Holmes to the porter. A lawyer, is he not? Grey-haired and walks with a limp? No, sir. This is Mr. Johnson, the coal owner, a very active gentleman, not older than yourself. Surely you're mistaken about this trade. No, sir. He has used this hotel for many years, and he's very well known to us. Ah, that settles it. Miss Aldmore, too. I seem to remember the name. Excuse my curiosity, but often in calling upon one friend one finds another. She's an invalid lady, sir. Her husband was once mayor of the Gloucester.
English.
She always comes to us when she's in town.
I told you so. I told you so. That's why. That's why the fake beard. I'm calling it.
As I called it earlier, which means maybe they'll change it now. I like the red herrings at least. Thank you. I'm afraid I cannot claim her acquaintance. We have established a most important fact by these questions, Watson, he continued in a low voice as we went upstairs together. We know now that the people who are interested in our friend have not settled down in his own hotel. That means that while they are, as we have seen, very anxious to watch him, they are equally anxious that he should not see them. Now this is most suggestive fact. What does it suggest? It suggests, hello, my dear fellow, what on earth is the matter? As we came around the top of the stairs, we had run up against Sir Henry Baskerville himself. His face was flushed with anger, and he held an old dusty boot in one of his hands. So furious was he that he was hardly articulate. When he did speak, it was in a much broader and more western dialect than any which we had heard from him in the morning. Seems to be they are playing me for a sucker in this hotel, he cried. They'll find they're started in to monkey with the wrong man unless they are careful. By thunder, if that chap can't find my missing boot, there will be trouble. I can take a joke with the best, Mr. Holmes, but they've got a bit over the mark this time. Still looking for your boot? Yes, sir, and mean to find it. But surely you said that it was a new brown boot. So it was, sir, and now it's an old black one. What? But you didn't mean to say. That's just what I do mean to say. I only had three pairs in the world: the new brown, the old black, and the patent leathers, which I am wearing. Last night I took one of my brown ones, and today they have sneaked one of the black ones. Well, have you got it? Speak out, man, and don't stand staring. An agitated German waiter had appeared upon the scene. Oh, I don't know how to. Now, sir, I have made inquiry all over the hotel, but I can hear no word of it. Well, either that boot comes back before the sundown, or I'll see the manager and tell him that I go right straight out of his hotel. It shall be found, sir. I promise you that if you will have a little patience, it will be found. Mind, it is, for it's the last thing of mine that I'll lose in this den of thieves. Well, well, Mr. Holmes, you'll excuse my troubling you about such a trifle. Trifle. I think it's well worth troubling about. Why? You look very serious over it. How do you explain it? I just don't attempt to explain it. It seems that very maddest, queerest thing that ever happened to me. Uh, Queer is another word for odd or weird. Um, I think it was originally odd or weird and then became queer in some of the modern ways that we know of it. Um, I sometimes use it in odd or weird of a situation. I think it's quite a nice word, especially to use it in other contexts. The, uh, the queerest, perhaps, said Holmes thoughtfully. What do you make of it yourself? Well, I don't profess to understand it yet. This case of yours is very complex, Sir Henry. When taken in conjunction with your uncle's death, I'm not sure that of all 500 cases of capital importance which I have handled, there is one which cuts so deep. But we hold several threads in our hands, and the odds are that one or the other of them guides us to the truth. We may waste time in following the wrong one, but sooner or later we must come upon the right. He had pleasant lunch. We had a pleasant luncheon in which little was said of the business which had brought us together. It was in a private sitting room to which we afterwards repaired that Holmes asked Baskerville what were his intentions. To go to Baskerville Hall. And when? At the end of the week. On the whole, said Holmes, I think that your decision is a wise one. I have ample evidence that you are being dogged in London, And amid the millions of this great city, it is difficult to discover who these people are and what their object can be. If their intentions are evil, they might do you mischief, and we should be powerless to prevent it. You did not know, Dr. Mortimer, that you were followed this morning from my house? Dr. Mortimer started violently. Followed? By whom? That, unfortunately, is what I cannot tell you. Have you among your neighbors or acquaintances on Dartmoor any men with a black full beard? No, or let me see. Why, yes, Barrymore, Sir Charles Butler, is a man with a full black beard. Ha! Where's Barrymore? He is in charge of the home. Hmm. I don't know which series of mine could be correct, which I guess is probably why there's multiple of them. I wonder if that's how Sherlock kind of feels when he goes through this, because he's like, oh, look, we have several series, one of them might be right, I suppose. Nonetheless, give me a telegram form. Is all ready for Sir Henry? That will do. Addressed to Mr. Barrymore. Give me a telegram form. Is all ready for Sir Henry? That'll do. Addressed to Mr. Barrymore, Baskerville Hall. What is the nearest telegraph office, Grimpen? Very good. We will send a second wire to the postmaster, Master Grimpen. Telegram to Mr. Barrymore to be delivered into his own hand. If absent, please return wire to Sir Henry Baskerville, Northumberland Hotel. That should let us know before evening whether Barrymore is at his post in Devonshire or not. That's so, said Baskerville. By the way, Dr. Mortimer, who is this Barrymore, anyhow? He is the son of the old caretaker who's dead. They have looked after the Hall for 4 generations now. So far as I know, he and his wife are as respectable a couple as any in the country. At the same time, said Baskerville, it's clear enough that so long as there are none of the family at the Hall, these people have mightily fine home and nothing to do. That is true. Did Barrymore profit at all by Sir Charles' will? Asked Holmes. He and his wife had £500 each. Ha! Did they know that they would receive this? Yes, sir. Charles was very fond of talking about the provisions of his will. That is very interesting. I hope, said Dr. Mortimer, that you do not look with suspicious eyes upon everyone who receives a legacy from Sir Charles, for I also had £1,000 left to me. Indeed. And anyone else? There were many insignificant sums of individuals, and a large number of public charities. The resides all went to Sir the residue all went to Sir Henry. And how much was the residue? Several hundred and 40,000 pounds. Holmes raised his eyebrows in surprise. I had no idea that such a gigantic sum was involved, said he. Sir Charles had the reputation of being rich, but we did not know how very rich he was until we came to examine his securities. The total value of the estate was close to £1,000,000. Dear me! It is a stake for which a man might well play a desperate game. And one more question, Dr. Mortimer. Supposing that anything happened to our young friend here, you will forgive the unpleasant hypothesis. Who would inherit the estate? Since Roger Baskerville, Sir Charles' younger brother, died unmarried, the estate would descend to the Desmonds, who are distantly cousins. James Desmond is an elderly clergyman in Westmoreland. Thank you. These details are all of great interest. Have you met Mr. James Desmond? Yes. He once came down to visit Sir Charles. He is a man of venerable appearance and of saintly life. I remember that he refused to accept any settlement from Sir Charles, though he pressed it upon him. And this man of simple tastes would be the heir to Sir Charles's thousands. He would be the heir to the estate because that is entitled. He would also be the heir to the money unless it were willed otherwise by the present owner, who can, of course, do what he likes with it. And have you made your will, Sir Henry? No, Mr. Holmes, I have not. I have no time, for it was only yesterday that I learned how matters stood. But in any case, I feel that the money should go with the title and estate. That was my poor uncle's idea. How is the owner going to restore the glories of the Baskervilles if he has not money enough to keep the property? House, land, and dollars must go together. Quite so. Well, Sir Henry, I'm of one mind with you as to the advisability. Because, okay, advise, but it's not advisability. Is it? Is it advisability? Good lord. I'm of one mind as you as to the advisability of your going down to Devonshire without delay. There is only one provision which I must make. You certainly must not go alone. Dr. Mortimer returns as me, but Dr. Mortimer returns as me. But Dr. Mortimer has his practice to attend to, and his house is miles away from yours. With all the good will in the world, he may be unable to help you. No, Sir Henry, you must take with you someone, a trusty man, who will be always by your side. Is it possible that you could come yourself, Mr. Holmes? If matters come to a crisis, I should endeavor to be present in person. But you can understand that, with my extensive consulting practice and with the constant appeals which reach me from many quarters, it is impossible for me to be absent from London for an indefinite time. At the present instant, one of the most revered names in England is being besmirched by a blackmailer, and only I can stop disastrous scandal. You will see how impossible it is for me to go then to Dartmoor. Whom would you recommend then? Holmes laid his hand upon my arm. If my friend would undertake it, there is no man who is better worth having at your side when you are in a tight place. No one can say so more confidently than I. Oh. The proposition took me completely by surprise, but before I had time to answer, Baskerville seized me by the hand and wrung it heartily. Well, now that is a real kind of you, Dr. Watson, said he. You have it is you see how it is with me, and you know just as much about the matter as I do. If you will come down to Baskerville Hall and see me through, I'll never forget it. The promise of adventure had always a fascinating a fascination for me, and I was complimented by the words of Holmes and by the eagerness with which the baronet hailed me as a companion. The baronet hailed me as a companion. I will come with pleasure, said I. I do not know how I could employ my time better. Man, sorry, right. Many things happened in that particular paragraph between the lines that I'm reading. One of which I want to uh, think about is as language. I know that there's cultural differences between languages that make them so. For example, I think if we take Japanese, from my interpretation of it, the politeness is a bare minimum in society, hence why there's different states of politeness. In Ukraine, the bare minimum expectation is to be people's focused. You're not focusing on what the problem is, you're focusing on its impacts on people. Um, and that can have different, layers to it, depending on whatever. All of these things have nuance, and I wonder, as language changes, such as English, if those ideas also change, and at what point can we pinpoint them to certain eras? Is there an English society thing going on? I do truly wonder that, because the sentence structure of Old English is almost a bit inverse in a way. I think it still tackles situation, but it makes sure to tackle the person last, which I find quite interesting. Could it be pointing out the person last, or could it be an attempt at humbleness? I read it more as that attempt at humbleness, in which case is it perhaps the change is spot on by what we currently know as American English, where humility is less revered. Quite. So therein lies my curiosity. Second matter at hand is Watson's General Watsonness. He's a great guy, but the fact that he gets swayed by praise this easily is a bit funny, if nothing else. And you will report very carefully to me, said Holmes. When a crisis comes, as it will do, I will direct how you shall act. I suppose that by Saturday all might be ready. Would that suit Dr. Watson? Perfectly. Then, on Saturday, unless you hear to the contrary, we shall meet at 10:30 train from Pennington. For those who are not aware of what contrary means unless you hear the opposite of. So when somebody is being contrary, for example, it means that they're being stubborn on purpose because they're trying to do the opposite of what you want them to do. Similarly, unless you hear to the contrary in this case means unless you hear something otherwise or the opposite of this information, this is what will remain true. So we had risen to depart when Baskerville gave a cry of triumph, and diving into one of the corners of the room, he drew a brown boot from under a cabinet. My missing boot! He cried. May all our difficulties vanish as easily, said Sherlock Holmes. But it is a very singular thing, Dr. Mortimer remarked. I searched this room carefully before lunch. And so did I, said Baskerville. Every inch of it. There was certainly no buttons then. In that case, the waiter must have placed it there while you were lunching. The German was sent for, but professed to know nothing of the matter, nor could any inquiry clear it up. Another item had been added to the constant and apparently purposeless series of small mysteries which had succeeded each other so rapidly. In this case, the word succeeded doesn't mean success, it means something following something else in the way that you can succeed a will. Uh, we love English. It's weird. It's really weird. Setting aside the whole grim story of Charles's death, we had a line of inexplicable incidents, all within the limits of 2 days, which included the receipt of the printed letter, the black-bearded spy in the hansom, the loss of the new brown boot, the loss of the old black boot, and now the return of the new brown boot. Holmes sat in silence in the cab as we drove back to Baker Street, and I knew from his drawn brows and keen face that his mind, like my own, was busy in endeavoring to frame some scheme into which all these strange and apparently disconnected episodes could be fitted. All afternoon and late into the evening he sat lost in tobacco and thought. Just before dinner, 2 telegrams were handed in. The first ran, I have just heard that Barrymore is at the Hole, Baskerville. The second, visited 23 hotels as directed, but sorry to report, unable to trace cut sheets from Thames. Cartwright. There go 2 of my threads, Watson. There is nothing more stimulating than a case where everything goes against you. You must cast around for another cent. We must cast around for another cent. We have still the cabman who drove to the spy. Exactly. I have wired to get his name and address from the official registry. I should not be surprised if this were an answer to my question.
Wait, you know what I'm wondering? Does wire mean telephone? Because this was before. I don't know the etymology of these words well enough, but there were telephones before electricity a little bit, right? They're quite a bit older, and this was before radio communication. And as such, perhaps that is why they call it the wire, because I know that you can transfer sounds through a wire without any electricity involved. Any child worth their salt, I suppose, has done that before. Cut out a pair of cups, connected them by a string, and then heard something.
or talk to someone. I think that's similar principle, right? And so wire obviously means communication. Uh, but I'm wondering now if the wire means telephone communication, perhaps. Um, right. The ring at the bell proved to be something even more satisfactory than an answer, however, for the door opened and a rough-looking fellow entered who was evidently the man himself. I got a message from the head office that a gent at this address had been inquiring for 2704, said he.
I think 2704 would have been the proper pronunciation until now. Well, oh well.
I've driven my cab this 7 years and never a word of complaint. I come here straight from the yard to ask you to your face what you had against me. I have nothing in the world against you, my good man, said Holmes. On the contrary, I have half a sovereign for you if you will give me a clear answer to my questions. Well, I've had a good day and no mistake, said the cabman with a grin. What was it you wanted to ask, sir? First of all, your name and address in case I want you again. John Clayton, 3 Turpey Street.
I've actually taken a drink. I got a very sudden case of dry throat, although I should have probably seen it coming because I felt it rasping for a bit. I'll see it coming next time better. That's good to know.
John Clayton, 3 Turpey Street, and the Borough. My cab is out of Shipley's Yard, near Waterloo Station. Sherlock made a note of it. Now, Clayton, tell me all about the fair who came and watched this house at 10 o'clock this morning, and afterwards followed the 2 gentlemen down the Regent Street. Mm. The man looked surprised and a little embarrassed. Why, there is no good my telling you things, for you seem to know as much as I do already, said he. The truth is that the gentleman told me that he was a detective and that I was to say nothing about him to anyone. My good fellow, this is a very serious business, and you may find yourself in pretty bad position if you try to hide anything from me. You say that your fare told you that he was a detective? Yes, he did. When did he say this? When he left me. Did he say anything more? He mentioned his name. Holmes cast a swift glance of triumph at me. Oh, he mentioned his name, did he? That was imprudent. What was the name that he mentioned? His name, said the cabman, was Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Never have I seen my friend more completely taken aback than by the cabman's reply. For an instant he sat in silent amazement. Then he burst into a hearty laugh. A touch, Watson, an undeniable touch, said he. I feel a foil as quick and supple as my own. He got home upon me very prettily this time. So his name was Sherlock Holmes, was it? Yes, sir, that was the gentleman's name. Excellent. Tell me, where you picked him up and all that occurred? He hailed me at 9:30 in Trafalgar Square. Oh, he hailed me at 9:30 at Trafalgar Square. He said that he was a detective and he offered me 2 guineas if I would do exactly what he wanted all day and ask no questions. I was glad enough to agree. First, we drove down to the Northumberland Hotel and waited there until 2 gentlemen came out and took a cab from the rank. We followed their cab until it pulled up somewhere near here. This very door, said Holmes. Well, I couldn't be sure of that, but I dare say my fare knew all about it. We pulled up halfway down the street and waited an hour and a half. Then 2 gentlemen passed us walking, and we followed down Baker Street along. I know, until we got 3 squares down to Regent Street. Then my gentleman threw up the trap, and he cried that I should drive right away to Waterloo Station as hard as I could. I whipped up the mare, and we were there under the 10 minutes. Then he paid up his 2 guineas, like a good one, and away he went into the station. Only just as he was leaving, he turned around and he said, "It might interest you to know that you have been driving Mr. Sherlock Holmes." That's how I come to know the name. I see. And you saw no more of him? Not after he went into the station. And how would you describe Mr. Sherlock Holmes? The cabman scratched his head. Well, he wasn't altogether such an easy gentleman to describe. I'd put him at 40 years of age, and he was of middle height, 2 or 3 inches shorter than you, sir. He was dressed like a toff, and he had a black beard, cut square at the end, and a pale face. I don't know if I could say more than that. Color of his eyes? No, I can't say that. Nothing more that you can remember? No, sir, nothing. Well, then, here is your half sovereign. There's another one waiting for you if you can bring any more information. Good night. Good night, sir, and thank you. John Clayton departed, chuckling, and Holmes turned to me with a shrug of his shoulders and a rueful smile. Snap goes our third thread, and we end where we begin, said he. The cunning rascal. He knew our number, knew that Sir Henry Baskerville had consulted me, spotted who I was in Regent Street, conjectured that I had got the number of the cab, and would lay my hands on the driver, and so sent back this audacious message. I tell you, Watson, this time we have got a foeman who is worthy of our steel. I've been checkmated in London. I can't only wish you better luck in Devonshire, but I'm not easy in mind about it. About what? About sending you. It's an ugly business, Watson. An ugly, dangerous business. And the more I see of it, the less I like it. Yes, my dear fellow, you may laugh, but I give you my word that I shall be very glad to have you back safe and sound in Baker Street once more.
And as such, we get to chapter 4. It is here that I believe will be good to also cut it, and we will continue from there next week as we continue reading this book. I hope you have enjoyed the reading so far. Perhaps it has helped you with some words or some other things, or even just getting things done. Maybe a good bedtime story, we'll see. I have seen one comment saying that on the early video, and I really appreciated that. A swift reminder that there is a stream coming tomorrow where I do some drawing. Until then, have fun